This is episode 3 of the Barber's Brief. This is going to be awesome. We've got news, highlights, case studies, and a couple pieces, well, at least one piece of creative.
Yeah.
This is going to be good.
Episode 3. Here we
Episode
go,
3.
man.
Yeah, this is fun. Okay, so in the news today, what's the first thing that kind of caught your attention over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, and listeners may be like, well, this is not really news, but this is news, at least the way I read it. So Unilever promoted internally to appoint essentially the new chief marketing officer. Those who don't know, Ezzy Eggleston-Bracey headed up Unilever's USA business, but is now taking on the role of chief growth and marketing officer. And a departure from the predecessor, which was Connie Brams, held the title of chief digital and commercial officer. So a couple things here. First of all, it's great to see large organizations are investing internally, and usually those CMO roles are usually externalized. So you want to bring in new thinking. So usually organizations look externally. So it's great to see that they're promoting from within. The second thing here that I thought was really interesting is the title itself. I think not too long ago, you would have seen a big shift in trying to bring together digital and commercial officers under one title, like chief commercial and digital officers, assuming those old CMO roles. But the new role here is chief growth and marketing officer. So again, language becomes important, but it almost feels like there's a shift now going back to, well, at the end of the day, it's marketing, it's growth, it's yes, all things that encompass that are things like digital and commercial.
Less about the tools.
Exactly. So I thought that was an interesting, just again, in language, that now we're starting to see more of this traditional, more chief growth and marketing officers coming back versus like the shoehorning people in that digital.
Yeah, that's a good story. It's interesting for sure. Especially the commercialization like focus of that title. I think that's interesting to see that coming out. There's an article that I saw that from HBR, which is not a new article also, but it's just been popping up a lot in my feed lately.
Right.
In various contexts. So the article is what B2B companies need to know about their buyers. And so it was written in 2022. But yeah, the things that I don't know, it just seems to be like popping up and filtering in my newsfeed.
It's all good.
So what's interesting to me is like there's some shocking stats in the sense of there's 80 to 90% of B2B buyers already have a short list of solution providers selected before they start their purchase cycle. So before they even begin like the sales process, they've already got like an initial consideration set, like their top, whatever it is, 5. And then what's even more shocking is of those companies that show up in your pipeline, there's a 90% chance that they'll select a vendor from their day one list.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so if from the implication there that I think is really interesting, like many B2C marketers, a lot of B2B marketers are focusing on sourcing high intent leads or, from places like ZoomInfo or any of those kinds of platforms. And so they're focusing tons of resources on the targeting people who are in market buyers, which may be putting them at a disadvantage because they've already made a decision at that point as to who they're going to put on their vendor list. So the implication there is like get out early, brand marketing, if you want to call it that, or demand gen, if you want to call it that, or top of funnel, whatever you want to call it. Reaching the 95% of the buyers who are out of market today to get them to think about putting you on their on their list is a really important part.
Man, that's a great one, because like now I'm trying to think if that's how I've operated, and maybe I have. It's almost like you go to what you've already know or have heard of through some capacity. So then if you're on the B2B side and you're trying to drive leads, maybe this is what Salesforce does really well, is because of the way that they're investing on, I guess their brand, if that's what we're going to call it. But it is top of mind for likely a lot of individuals. Oh, I've heard of Salesforce.
Yeah, that is one of the places where I heard the study, because the CMO or chief growth, I think he might actually have been a chief growth officer for Salesforce, was on John Evans' podcast on Censored CMO. And that was one of the places where I heard about the study.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense. It's a thing. And he is targeting top of funnel, demand gen, brand, again, whatever you want to call it.
That's another podcast.
Yeah. What else you got,
Um,
B?
yeah. So Strategy Online. So the CEO of Nestle, Mark Schneider, actually announced that they're promising a increase in marketing spend across the board, so across all of their product profiles, which is again, if we think about the time that we're actually operating in right now, where it's not favorable in terms of the buying power that consumers had is not the same. People are being a lot more careful on how they purchase, but it just shows how important that marketing still remains to be, and why the increase of the spend is good, because it's showing that they're seeing growth on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for my biggest takeaway here is, like, marketing should never be really something, and maybe this is because we're marketers and we're saying this, but I think there's a lot of data that suggests that you should never really be going dark, even in moments where things are, I guess those increasing headwinds.
Mm-hmm.
Your ability, and maybe this plays into your previous example, like, how do you maintain that top of mind when someone maybe not even market today, but they will be in market?
Mm-hmm.
So that for me is just an interesting takeaway. When you have an organization like Nestle, it's like, no, we're going to double down on our marketing efforts,
Hmm.
and continue to invest, because I think that's what's needed during this time.
Yeah, we're gonna see that theme come back in another story that I've got later. But for now,
Yeah.
another great post from Mark Ritson this week in Marketing Week. He wrote a cool article about synthetic data.
Mm.
Um, so, okay, imagine this. Imagine a perceptual map,
Hmm.
right? And you've got all the North American car manufacturers plotted based on their perception on an XY. Top right, you've got companies like BMW, Audi, Mercedes
Yep.
Benz.
Hmm.
Bottom left, you got companies like Dodge, Chevy, and Ford.
Sure.
Totally, and then all the other cars are kind of mixed in that, and it looks totally normal, totally feasible. The ones that are clustered together, like Audi, BMW, and Benz, they're clustered together because they have
Yep.
similar properties. Same thing with Dodge, Chevy, and Ford. Um, and so they looked at it. All kinds of marketers would look at that and go, "Yeah, that looks right." The chart itself was created from a sample size of 0. So it was completely synthetic data that was
Okay.
using to generate this graph.
Okay.
So AI, let's call it AI,
Yeah. Yeah.
made the made that chart. And so then researchers later ran an actual study of that same data set, or of that same car manufacturers in North America,
Hmm.
and their report turned out that it was a 90% match rate on what the synthetic data produced, or the AI report produced.
What?
Yeah, so there's a lot of so it's pretty accurate.
Oh boy.
So there's a whole bunch of implications there, which is exciting on one hand. You can go down the Terminator world, that kind of line. But on the other hand, there's a whole bunch of things that are really cool that are going to be coming for marketers because of
That's
this
true.
stuff. So as long as we can continue to validate these types of
Hmm.
models, it means you can execute on things like, what is my excess share of voice, or what is the media spend I need to achieve to get excess share of
Yeah.
voice. You can run things like, what is the customer's willingness to pay based on pricing band changes on my
Hmm.
product. You can measure things like category entry points. You can measure brand attributes, all those kinds of things that could be done in like 3 seconds with a click of a button. I think
Hmm.
are going to be coming in a really meaningful way for a lot of marketers.
I love that. The more, I guess, maybe it's AI here, really help accelerate the idea of, giving marketers more tools at the end of the day to help defend the discipline. I think it's a good thing in its entirety. Um, I guess my only thing is here, like, how is this information being used? If it's data sets that it's coming from your own organization, you're able to pump it in, that kind of can give you some of those answers. I think that's great.
Yeah,
If it could be augmented from stuff that's openly available as well, I think I don't know, it's more tools. I love it.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Um, so my next one actually was so I don't know how familiar you are with Amazon and a lot of the suite of products that they have from
Never heard of Amazon.
Nah, but
You
yeah,
mean
they
the
just
jungle?
the Amazon jungle, yes. But what's cool is like they actually just updated their a suite of products with new, I guess what they're calling like data clean room and AI image generators. So this was in Marketing Dive. But what's interesting is like they're basically unveiling new advertising products for essentially for advertisers, where it kind of gives them access to more AI intelligence, I guess, to help with with creating of the ads. But
Hmm.
also for me, it's like they have a new DSP. So
Oh,
Amazon's come to the foreground now with their own DSP, which is interesting, as a part of like their Amazon Marketing Cloud product,
hmm.
which is really cool. I would also argue that their cross-channel media planner also is really interesting because it gauges the audience reach and relevance by channel. So it gives
Hmm.
another tool, I guess, to marketers to make sure that they're reaching the right audiences. And I've played with Amazon a little bit in one of my previous lives, and it's an evolving platform, which is exciting. But if you want to see intent to purchase, Amazon's a great tool
Yeah, yeah,
to be able to identify. So a lot of this stuff is really just open to the US right now. So all our US listeners, like, go in, use it. Let us know how it's working for you
yeah,
before it does open up here in Canada. But yeah, I think it's another great win for advertisers.
yeah. That's awesome.
What'd you have, Lex? Is this the last one?
This is the last one.
Oh, what we got?
So the message, well, the last news story, we got a couple other
Yeah,
ones
yeah,
too, but yeah, there's
yeah.
a publisher called The Message, and I've seen this on Marketing Week and other outlets. But Unilever came out, the new CEO of Unilever came out and said
Hmm.
he thinks purpose is pointless for some brands.
For most brands, I'm gonna say for most brands. Sorry.
Yeah. So what's interesting is like a bunch of years ago, Unilever comes out and says we're going to be a global leader in sustainable business. Um, they're a pioneer in that brand purpose marketing space, and so
Hmm.
they end up getting these things where like Hellman's is there to save all the chickens on the planet because you use eggs to make to make mayonnaise.
Oh
I
wow.
mean, so they're sitting there and they're realizing their sales aren't nearly as good as what they should be, and so they've decided now that they're going to focus on a faster growth strategy,
Hmm.
which connects to the growth person that you or the CMO is now the chief growth officer,
Yeah.
rather than a digital officer or anything. There's a definitive focus on growth here,
Right.
and they're not going to force fit purpose into every brand that they have. So Dove is one that I don't know which ones they're going to continue doing, but I could see
Yeah.
them continuing on that campaign
Yep.
of real beauty. But it might mean that Hellman's doesn't have a purpose for their mayonnaise.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, so yeah, interesting for driving growth. Unilever is going to continue investing in marketing and brand investments, and they're increasing their budget. This is crazy numbers. 2021, they had 6.9 billion invested,
My
which was
God.
down from the previous like few years. So then 2022, they
I
added
wonder.
almost $1 billion.
I wonder if the marketers on the Unilevers were up in arms because it went down from 7.8 to
Yeah,
6.9
probably. I
billion.
mean, $1 billion is a lot of money. You can do a lot of things with that. And so they've been steadily increasing their investments in brand, and then
Sure.
they're only going to keep brand purpose where they can provide evidence and demonstration of commitment,
Yeah.
which
Obviously.
basically is saying we're not putting lipstick on a pig if we can't do it.
I absolutely love that. I know you and I've talked about this on the podcast numerous times. I know Roger Martin also talked about it as well. And
Yeah,
I love this because I think it is actually speaking some sense into maybe a lot of people think about this, but they're not openly as vocal about it because like, purpose is important in our society today, and making
yeah,
sure that you are able to tie something back to a greater idea. But not all products need to have purpose, right?
yeah,
And I think that's where, at the end of the day, just calling it out for what it is, I think is important.
yeah. Case study.
Time for a case study. So now's where I get like my little blanket, and Mark's gonna. You're up this week
Yeah.
for the case study. So
Yeah.
you
Oh
have
yeah,
here,
I'm up, not Europe. Yeah, yeah.
not Europe. No, no,
Yeah.
no.
But we do have a province in Canada featured. So this is
We
the
do actually.
yeah. So there's we have some friends at an agency called ZGM, and they have a client, the government of Alberta, and they did a campaign called Alberta's Calling. So for anyone who's listening that's not from Canada, Canada's a really big country with very small population that's spread across the border.
Yeah.
Alberta is one of the provinces within Canada. Um, Calgary itself is a city within Alberta, and Calgary is like around a million and 1.3 million people or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Right close to the mountains. There's a lot of like great things in to do in Alberta, and it doesn't have the high cost of living that Toronto does or Vancouver does, or
Right.
Montreal even for that matter.
Income tax is lower too.
Income tax is lower, yeah. And so Alberta's been blessed, I would say, with natural resources. There's oil and gas here. It's kind of like Texas North,
Yeah.
but a lot of and we've got cattle and beef farming and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the challenges with the industry here is that it's been so focused on oil and gas and ranching for so long that it's hard to pull people here, draw people in. So ZGM ran this campaign, Alberta's Calling. Oh, and the other thing is there's this huge growing tech scene in Alberta.
Big tech scene.
Yeah. So there's constantly this need for high skilled workforce and more unique skills that aren't in the oil and gas field. So Alberta's always looking at trying to draw more talent here.
Mm-hmm.
And so for Alberta to thrive in the future, the government of Alberta brought on ZGM to try and help them figure out how to pull in more skilled young labor because we can't produce it quickly enough internally.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to figure out how to bring people from specifically Toronto and Vancouver. So ZGM took that brief. They looked at the challenges that those people in those markets were having. They recognized that there's this really high cost of living in some of these other cities, Toronto and
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver specifically. And so there's also misperceptions that people had of what Alberta was,
Mm-hmm.
sort of all cowboys and oil. Um, and so there's advantages that Alberta has over these other countries: affordability, career opportunities, lifestyle from these other cities. So the
Mm-hmm.
strategy was that saying that Alberta's diverse and rich in culture would easily be like dismissed. And so they really wanted to focus their messaging on jobs, housing, and lifestyle, which is the things that really mattered to these people they were trying to pull in.
Right.
And specifically, the cost of living in those other cities, Toronto and Vancouver, is insane
It
for a
is
lot of
crazy.
people. And so there's a huge advantage in Alberta. So they launched this campaign in summer 2022, starting with website, radio, audio stream that comes up again. It's not just radio, it's audio.
Audio, that's right.
Digital and social, and they targeted Vancouver and Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And they were specifically using some humor in their creative and featuring the advantages that Alberta had, including things like affordable homes, the livable city, family friendly, really good career opportunities.
Right.
And then the second phase of that in the fall, they did a big takeover at Yonge and Bloor, like the major subway station
Yep.
intersection in Toronto, and then also at Granville and Robinson
Mm-hmm.
or Robson. And they also did a Vancouver Sun wrap. So it was really well coordinated. All the creative was like consistent across all the different channels, and then the results were insane. Alberta had the biggest in my internal migration over every other province in that period of time.
That's
Alberta's
crazy.
population grew by 60,000 in the quarter following the campaign, more than any other year since they began estimating populations in 1951.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was nuts.
5
And it's
goes
funny,
west.
my backyard neighbor or back alley neighbor
Yeah.
saw that, and I was joking around with him like, yeah, he's like from Toronto.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he and his wife moved out here as part of that,
Yeah.
because of that campaign, partly.
No way.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And they ended up winning an Effie for it. So, yeah, it's pretty impressive, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I always felt, and maybe this is bias, local bias, but like growing up here and whatnot, I don't think many other provinces truly appreciate how unique Alberta is. And it has a lot going for it. And this is not like a public service announcement. We're trying to say get more people coming to Alberta, but it is a very 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 interesting province to be a part of, and I think with things that are changing and the tech scene growing, there's a lot more to make Alberta. I don't want to say current,
Hmm.
but just more appealing to obviously different demographics and just what traditionally Alberta's been known for its oil. So I love the diversification of our province, especially from an industry perspective.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool, and I like this case study. It's about like migration of people,
Yeah,
which is, and they had other metrics like website visits, which went up a ton, and then
sure,
impressions and engagement and email signups, all that kind of stuff, and all those did well. But I just like we see it living here. There's a lot
totally.
more people moving here,
Oh
which is
man, like just out west here of my place, like there's more townhomes are going up. It's changing, and we just had this Stony Road, which is like a big rig road around Calgary,
yeah,
just opened up behind us as well. It just shows because you need to move this population that's coming in more
yeah,
efficiently, right? So it's great for the city, great for the province, and fantastic campaign, obviously. So
yeah.
kudos to the team there. And actually, I wanted to say, if there's anyone else there that has case studies that would like for us to highlight during the show, feel free to reach out to us. Let us know because we want to
Hmm.
make sure that we're highlighting a lot of that great work that's happening out there. Out of the
Ah,
week.
wait, there you go.
Out of the week. So this was me. So I had to pick the out of the week this week, and it's no. I guess I'm kind of proud of this. I am kind of like a sports guy, so I do enjoy watching my sports from time to time. And just recently, Beats by Dre, they well, LeBron James has been always kind of an ambassador for the product, but they also got Erling Holland from Manchester City. He's a huge footballer, soccer player,
Yeah.
plays a striker position, and he's just crushing it over there. So he's now an ambassador as well. And they had an ad that was just launched called "The King and the Viking." And the interesting thing about this ad is they actually had, so for LeBron James, his wife, Savannah, narrate for
Mm-hmm.
him essentially like the upcoming season. And whereas for Erling, it was his father. So I love the creative execution around this. And while the product is like showing them in,
Hmm.
we'll obviously add this to the show notes, but it's showing like how they're preparing for the day of the game. So
Hmm.
they're using the Beats by Dre headphones and whatnot. But it's funny because it's less about the headphones. It's more about the narration that's happening around how they prepare for the day.
Hmm.
The product becomes essentially just a byproduct of their preparation. But and yes, it's in all the product shoots. But if you watch the commercial and you watch the how it's being narrated, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool because I even resonated with this ad, and I haven't played anything semi-professional like these gentlemen have. But for
Hmm.
me, I'm like, no, I get that. I get game day, what it's like on game day, how
Hmm.
you want to really kind of zone in,
Zone in.
and then you have like your supporting network that's helping you get hyped for the game.
Hmm.
So I for me it resonated really well, and I think it was really really well done from a creative execution perspective. So yeah, I
Yeah.
that's
I
my highlight today.
yeah, and I thought it was interesting. There's a whole bunch of things I was thinking about when I was watching it, and I think that there's so much material in that they could probably build out a
Splice.
cool, yeah, a cool campaign overall, and takes bits and
Totally.
pieces, yeah, like just to all of it. I think it's really interesting in how to imagine taking that one asset and multiplying it across all kinds of different channels.
That's a
Um,
great
but
point.
but the other part that I thought was interesting, and you talked about it too, is it's like it's centered around a category entry point,
Hmm.
which is that like getting in the zone for a game,
Totally.
and so that is a moment in time when you want a buyer to think of your product. So I like that part too.
That's a great
It
point.
was really interesting.
Yeah, I think again, like you expect sometimes some of these big brands to be able to pull off, and obviously, the notoriety that LeBron James has or Erling Holland. At the end of the day, you see here what a demographic, if you will, like you're targeting Europe and you're targeting U.S. as well. But LeBron James's like brand is larger than the U.S.
Yeah.
but it's just interesting, like how they're able to reach a global audience with two very popular athletes right now, but it's
Yeah,
also at two different parts of their careers
totally.
too. So, and I think again, there's a really interesting narrative there that
Yeah,
really showcases the power of I guess in this sense like advertising. So
yeah,
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 it was really well done. So what's coming
yeah.
up next week? What do we got?
Well, hold on. We have one question, a Q&A,
Oh Jesus, yeah,
from
you're right.
Dr. Willie Sussland. Um, there was a post I put up, and then one of the questions he put in the post was, "Do you need to prior or customize messaging to all people involved in the decision making process for each?" Well,
Mm,
he's specifically talking about a B2B post that I was putting up, but I
this was
think,
a good question.
yeah, it's interesting for us to talk about that for B2B versus B2C. What do you think? Quick take, fee. What do you think?
Quick take as my earphone pops
Pops
out.
out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so the for me, what one example comes to mind. So first of all, if I'm thinking about, I have a product that appeals to children, but the children don't purchase the products, the parents purchase the products. I would still target the ads or the messaging around children, but then you make, say, for instance, a price point someone that a parent would look at and be like, no, no, it's affordable, or I can definitely.
Hmm.
So inadvertently, you're talking to the parents as well. I think for me, it's focusing more on on the core audience and the messaging around that versus trying to cover all the bases, because
Hmm.
that iteration process, if you think about, just the content demands on doing so, is quite large, and I don't know if you're actually going to get the benefit that you're actually looking for. So
Hmm.
I would say focus on that one core, and then just make sure it's somewhat malleable where you can inadvertently target others as well.
Hmm. Yeah, my take on that, on from a B2B side, or B2B, B2C even for that matter, is I could see how you could customize messaging in B2B if you have a like a sales rep that's doing the messaging. And
Yeah,
and I think salespeople do that naturally anyway. I used to be in sales. It's a thing.
yeah,
But if you're talking about media, you have to find out whether you can even segment the audience differently,
totally.
right? Like if you're running a TV ad, um, I don't know that you can reach those two audiences distinctly. So you have to expect that there's going to be a blend or an overlap.
Yeah,
And I think from a messaging point of view, in a decision making unit for a B2B scenario, there's for sure there's differences and everyone's going to have their own nuances. But I think it's really important to understand what all those individuals who are in the decision making unit are thinking
hmm
about. We
hmm
talked about Brent Adamson,
yeah,
and he was like, "Oh yeah, there's what was the number 6.1 people involved in the decision making process," and then he
and then it
found out.
grew.
Yeah, he found out it actually is more like 14. And
Yeah,
so it's really hard to find well, to really develop messaging for all 14 people.
totally.
And I think it's an interesting question, but a challenging execution. And I don't know if that's totally necessary because there's a lot of similarities. And I
Totally.
think like a lot of things are about just decreasing risk.
Hmm.
So if you find the commonalities that relate to all of them, you can
Yeah.
slightly tweak the messaging depending on whether it's through a salesperson or whatever else. But I would focus on the similarities between them all because there's a lot of decision makers, and so you might just be needlessly fractioning your messaging.
Yeah. And I think I guess when you put it in that context, it's almost like trying to find the largest common denominator, right? So
Right.
it's something that can appeal very easily to a larger audience because
Yeah.
you
Like
never
I don't
want.
want to get fired.
No, especially not in this environment. You don't want to be getting fired. But I think by doing so, you're maximizing the audience potential versus trying to find all these smaller audiences that
Yeah.
conversion rates may be higher, but you're losing on the reach side, right? So there's a
Yeah.
careful balance there, and that's why the messaging of it becomes incredibly important,
Yeah.
where you're not really shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. And I think a single piece of creative, if you're smart, to your point, you can put pricing in there that's appealing to one group, and then the creative showing the thing in use, which might appeal to the end user.
Yeah,
So
totally.
you don't have to. I think if you understand all those differences, you don't have to create separate messaging. You can actually do a good job combining it all.
Yeah, no, I agree.
What do we got coming up next week?
Well, I know we said this 2 weeks ago, but It is going to be John Dawes. NPS is really the only number you need to measure. We're really excited to be releasing that next week. I think it's going to shed a lot of light on this topic, and I know it's a
Totally.
controversial one, but I think there's a lot of data to the showcases, and I don't want to give away the conversation that we had, but just tune in. It is
Yeah,
really
it's
good.
really good.
It's really good.
Okay, so I think we'll probably end up doing this again.
I think so.
Yeah, if you've got any, not UV, but
Oh,
you listening,
I got a
if
lot.
you've got any questions, feel free to send them out. And just reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
That's right. So till next week.
Adieu. Oh,
Or
no,
go
you
chase
said prof.
go chase profitability. Come on, man.
I
Oh
know.
my goodness. We're not cutting
All right.
this out.
No, we're keeping it. All right, take it easy.
All right, take care.